The cross was meant to take away any dignity or any credibility a person may have. But yet, these soldiers, they were commanded to do that. This was their job. They were used to seeing the brutality, used to seeing that, and they got desensitized to it. And I pray that we, as Christians and as a church, never get so accustomed to the brutality of the cross that it no longer moves us. You see, part of the cross that we don't talk enough about, the cross wasn't meant just simply to kill a person. There is much easier, more efficient ways to kill someone. The cross was meant to take away any dignity or any credibility a person may have. It was meant to humiliate the person, to take every ounce of respect away. And so all of this was part of this process as a way to mock and to humiliate, to shame them into oblivion, to kill their name. And you see the cruelty of these men. I want to show you a few things. Look at verse 27. It says, the governor's soldiers took Jesus into the praetorium and gathered the whole company of soldiers around him. Now think about this. This wasn't just one guy deciding, hey, let's have fun with this guy. Let's pick on Jesus. Let's torture him. Let's mock and laugh at him. No, they gathered everybody around. That means when they bring him in, they start doing this. They said, hey guys, come over here. Look at this guy. Let's laugh at him. And do y'all know how humiliating it is to be at the center of the ridicule of a group of folks? When I was young, I told you about my speech impediment and all that. My twin brother also had a speech impediment, and he got picked on just like I did. But one day we were riding the bus, and he had a very bad lisp. And a group of guys was laughing at him. I think we were like in 5th grade. These kids were in 8th or 9th. But they said, say purple, and he would say purple. And then they started laughing. They called all their other players, all their other friends, and the whole back of the bus was all these boys and girls laughing at my brother. And they'd say it again. And he'd go, purple. And they would laugh. And y'all, we felt like we were that big. Do you know how humiliating that is? Now, I got to tell you that my brother is a cop now. He carries a gun. But the idea of Jesus at his center. My mind goes back to when there was a woman caught in the act of adultery, and all the Pharisees and religious leaders are gathered around, and they were mocking her, and Jesus, stood up for her. But now he's the one in the middle, and they're all laughing at him. And then it says next in verse 28, they stripped him, put a scarlet robe on him. They stripped him. For the Jews, especially of that day, that would be one of the most shameful things you could endure, to be exposed. You read the Old Testament, whenever it connects sin with the consequences of sin, one of the things they tend to say most often is, they looked upon his nakedness. Noah was drunk, they looked upon his nakedness. Lot and his daughters, they looked upon their nakedness. It was a way to show just the shamefulness. And y'all know that that's one of the most shameful things, is to expose someone, to strip them down, and to take all that dignity away. And here Jesus was stripped naked, and then they clothed him in mockery. Look at verse 28. They stripped him and put a scarlet robe on him, and then twisted together a crown of thorns and set it on his head. They put a staff in his right hand and knelt in front of him and mocked him. Hail, King of the Jews, they said. Again, I can't get past my mind. This is Jesus who's been flogged. He is half dead. He's barely standing. When he carries his cross, he can't even do it. But yet here they are mocking him. They're laughing at him. They're putting robes on him, saying, look, oh, you think you're a king? Here. Put the crown of thorns on his head. And it says that they had a staff that was his hand, and they took that staff and started beating him. I always wondered, did he refuse to hold it? Or was he in such pain he couldn't hold it? And verse 30, they spit on him and took the staff and struck him on the head again and again. And after they had mocked him, they took off the robe and put his own clothes on him. Then they led him away to crucify him. They hit him, but then they spit on him. Why do you spit on someone? I mean, you're not going to do any physical harm by spitting on someone. It's just meant to degrade, to humiliate. And again, it's not like Jesus is like this big oppressor and they're in defiance spitting at him. No, he's beaten to an inch of his life. He's laying on the ground and they're making fun of him, laughing at him, and then they're spitting on him. That's the cruelty. That's the depravity. That is the meanness. And you read that, how can you be so cruel? And we ask that same question of ourselves. How can people be so mean? How can people be so cruel? Well, I'll tell you the easy answer to that is sin. Sin lurks deep in the heart of men. Sometimes, y'all, we are just mean and we can't really put a finger on it. Why? It's just our nature. Sometimes we're just mean. Saint Augustine had a great thing about this. He said when he was younger, he went to a pear orchard. And inside there, he saw all these pears, and he started to steal the pears and just throw them away. And he said that really bothered him afterwards because he didn't know why he did it. Because he said, A, I wasn't hungry, and B, I didn't like pears. The only thing he knew why he did it was because someone said he couldn't do it. He wasn't supposed to. And y'all know we have that rebellious streak in us, and there's something whenever we want to be mean because in part, we know we're supposed to be nice. And there's something about trying to elevate ourselves by putting other people down. And I think there is a deeper theological reason here why these soldiers were so mean to Jesus. And that's because of who Jesus is, who he claimed to be. You know, when I read the Gospels, I look, how can anybody not love Jesus? He loved those that nobody else loved. He healed those nobody else could heal. He taught about God's love, about God's mercy, his grace. I'm like, how could you not love Jesus? But people weren't upset with his healings. They weren't upset with his niceness. It was because he claimed to be the King of Kings and Lord of Lords, God in the flesh. And even today, there are people who despise the name of Jesus. They don't despise the name of other religious figures. But something about Jesus. The idea that, who do you think you are? God in the flesh? Who do you think you are? Now, on top of this, there's some other more practical things I think that play into this, and I think it plays into us too and why we are at times so mean. One is that the soldiers were prejudiced against the people of God. Roman soldiers hated to be sent to Judea, hated to be sent to Galilee, to these areas, because the Jewish people were known for being stubborn, to being committed to their God, to being rebellious. They were not going to be told how to worship. They were not going to be told to give up their beliefs. Other groups may just go along and say, okay, Romans, you're here. But no, the Jews would stand firm. And so there were zealots. There were people who would fight back. And so they were used to these things. And so they hated being sent there. They're like, these people are so backward. They're so stubborn. And so anytime they had a chance to really get back at them, oh, we have a Jewish peasant here. Oh, he thinks he's a king, does he? But we'll show him what a true king is. You think you have power? Let us show you power. And in many ways, there are people who will still today despise the name of Jesus and hate everything about Jesus, even though they've never read about Jesus, never spoke to Jesus. The only thing is they have contact with the people of God, with his church. And there are people who will say the worst things about Jesus because of someone they've met who claimed to be a Christian. And they take all their anger and all their frustration out on Jesus because of the people. Now, on a side note, just a reminder, there are people out there who do not know Jesus, who have never picked up a Bible, never been to the walls of a church, and they look at your life. And you are the ambassador for God's kingdom. The second thing, and we often overlook this, is the familiarity these soldiers had with the cross. The cross was a horrible, tragic thing, but for these soldiers, this was their job. This is what they did. They got up, they punched their clock, their card, they came in, they tortured, they crucified, they went home, had supper, washed up, tomorrow wash, rinse, repeat. This was their job. They were used to seeing the brutality, used to seeing that, and they got desensitized to it. They just didn't see it as all this stuff. It's kind of like the way that sometimes we get desensitized to all the meanness out there. I told you about my brother. He was a cop, and he worked traffic scenes. He was in charge of Hardin County doing all the traffic scenes. And the first wreck he came upon, oh my goodness, it horrified him. The mangled body, the terrible things. But by the 40th time, it was like, oh yeah, there's a body. And there's a body over there too. Okay, mark it down. It was just he got desensitized to it. And I pray that we, as Christians and as a church, never get so accustomed to the brutality of the cross that it no longer moves us. That when you hear that Jesus Christ suffered and died for you, that you don't say, oh yeah, we knew that. We heard that last Easter. It needs to move us to see what he experienced, to see what he went through. When we hear those words, my body broken for you, do you hear it? What's amazing to me is how cruel these men were, but yet here was this wonderful grace of God meeting it.